Hello, everyone in section 17 who opted into the video critique. We are going to go ahead and get started, and we are just going to travel down in order of when you posted. So we're going to start with Alex and move down, and looks like maybe Amanda would be next. Okay, so just going down the Facebook post, that's the order that we'll be moving in for these critiques. Feel free to watch your classmates. Oh, there's Adam's right after Alex's. Okay, so feel free to watch your classmates if you have time. I just quickly want to remind you to be sure to look over the minimum expectations for the assignments, okay? A lot of times there are a few things that people miss, including you do need to have one page that has at least 2 columns on it. You do need to have an article from LDS.org or the scroll. If you don't want to use the whole article, that's totally fine. You can cut off the article at a point that makes sense in your design and just include one line at the bottom that says read more at LDS.org / whatever your link is. Okay, because if you're cramming your whole article in and there's not a lot of white space, it's really going to make the overall aesthetic of your design suffer. So feel free to cut off that article in order to make the page look better. Another thing people often miss is the subheadings. Okay, so be sure to get that in there too. Pull quotes and the images that you took, people usually remember those. The word wrap, people usually remember. Okay, so it's just the subheadings and a few other things that sometimes people overlook. So be sure to do that so you can get full credit. I do want to remind you I'll still be grading based on the principles of design, like alignment, repetition, things like that are really going to overall affect the overall look of the design. Okay, so be sure to keep those in mind as you're doing your design. Also, typography. Don't go crazy and give me 4 different typefaces. Show me that you remember what we learned early on the section in typography. Have 2 really strong contrasting typefaces. Be sure your typeface that you're using for the body of your design is legible. Okay, so those are some of the things that hopefully will be helpful as you're doing your design. Let's just go ahead and get started with Alex's. I was trying to decide, I think the other image is actually your first one. So I think this would be first. And I like this image. The only thing, it's a little, it's kind of hard to see because it's a little bit small. Let me see if I can get your image a little bit bigger. Tiny bit bigger. It's a little bit hard to see the word repentance. And so I don't know, maybe you would consider putting a bold on that typeface. And then I might move them a little bit closer. You probably have them placed this way so they're legible. The is stands out a little bit too much to me since it's black. So I might just keep it the same color or maybe do a dark gray. So kind of pick up the clouds but make it a little bit more matching with your overall color aesthetic. It really stands out because of this background image you have, and that's probably not the word that you want to stand out. You could switch and make repentance in black, and so I might consider doing something like that. Moving down here, and I think you have a quote here which is pretty hard to see, so I would probably consider moving that off of your image so that it's legible. I would move this column down. You do have your 2 columns, which is great. I would move this one down a little bit so it's not quite so close to your image. And you start out with the large letter, which is really nice. I'm not sure if you had a chance to see on my other announcement video, I showed you actually how to do that with the correct tool here in InDesign, and that's this tool that you can find on the paragraph palette. Now what that'll do is it'll keep the top of the letter aligned and it'll make your body copy wrap around this main letter and it'll look really neat. So you have a good start here with the Y, but it would look even cooler to have it down resting in this body copy and have the words wrapping around it. So again, you're just going to use this tool right here. Oh, actually, I think it's this one to the left of it. Okay, so yeah. drop cap number of lines. All right. And then let's take a look at everything else. Looks pretty good. Since it's small, I can't see very well what typeface you're using here, but it looks nice and legible, which is the main important thing. All right, let's go ahead and look at this next page. I see your images. You did a really good job wrapping around this. I might decrease the amount of space here. It looks like maybe it's a little bit too much. So maybe just pull that in a little bit so it's not quite so much of a distance. You have your subheadings here. I would love to see these in a contrasting typeface. So maybe you use the typeface that is this nice sans serif, and you make them really big and keep them in that orange color. That would be great. But that would be nice to see them in a different typeface so they contrast. I would probably try to make these columns a little bit smaller so you have more white space on the page. Maybe end them or make them a little bit narrower perhaps. You're probably running into an issue right here where you have only one word per line, and see how it has this awkward gap? It's because precedent isn't able to fit here. So one thing you could consider is you could make this image even bigger and have it go off the side of the page, and then you could do a text wrap with your columns, and that way it wouldn't look quite as symmetrical. So it would look a little bit more visually interesting, and you wouldn't run into this problem of not having your column be wide enough to fit the words. That's why you're getting this awkward gap here. Okay, so that could be a possible idea. You could move it down and make it bigger too, so it's going off the bottom and the side, and wrap these columns around it and pull the columns in a little bit more so you have some more white space around it as well. And then this image, I would try to make sure your quote isn't right up here against the edge. That's called a tangent when you have the words right up against the edge. So I'd pull it a little bit more over. I'd make sure it's legible. Maybe you could you could either make this image transparent behind it, and how you do that is you just need to open your effect palette, and you can increase or decrease the opacity of that image in the background. Okay, so that might help this image if you want to keep the quote on top of it. And then you have a lot of kind of awkward white space right here, which is where your eye is going to go if this is a spread. It's going to be hard to read right along the edge, and this is going to be where it's the easiest to read. So I'd probably move your column over a little bit so it's more occupying this prime eye real estate on the page. You can make your column narrower and make two small columns down here on the bottom. And maybe you could make this image long and stretch it all the way across the page. Of course, don't stretch the image by disproportionately. If you're able to make it larger and then maybe crop it up so it's a long, thin rectangle along the top, that would be cool. Or if you want to keep the nice leading lines that you have in this image, you could keep it this width and maybe bring it in a little bit, crop out a little bit of the sky, make it a little bit bigger or more visually interesting. But you're definitely heading down the right track. The only thing I might say is maybe play around with changing the background color of one of these pages. Sometimes you'll find a really nice white will actually kind of freshen up the look and make your images pop a little bit more. You could keep one of the pages this green, but add some white in there too. Probably might look really nice, and then your black typeface will be a little bit more legible. You could also play around with keeping the color, but making your shape in the background maybe just a large rectangle or a triangle or something like that. With all the different, if you keep this image a rectangle and make this a big circle going off the page, I probably wouldn't do a triangle. That might be too many shapes, but a nice rectangle behind this image might look good. Or like I mentioned earlier, you could keep the green on one page and do white on the other. Okay, so those are some ideas for you, Alex. You're definitely heading in the right direction. You have a lot of the required elements in place. Just some fine tuning this week, and I'll look forward to seeing your final spread. Thanks, Alex. Okay, let's go ahead and see who's next. Okay, it is going to be you, Adam. Okay, let me go ahead and pull this up here. Okay, overall your design aesthetic is looking really good. I like the overall layout. I love this image in the background, and then the white space that you have, the white in the background, your quotes looking really nice. The only thing is I don't know if you have taken these two images yourself. I could guess you probably could take this one pretty easily. This one maybe you did. That might explain why it's a little bit grainy. And so if that's the case, I don't know if you have any other images of the temple that aren't grainy, that would be even better. Or if you could take this image, if you know how to use Photoshop, you could take it in and play it around a little bit in Photoshop. If not, maybe you could just play around even in the photo editor and that comes with your computer, and try to see if you could put a layer over it, an effect over it that would make this background look a little more solid. I think that's one of the reasons it's looking kind of grainy. So otherwise it's a pretty cool image, and if you took this one, this one looks really nice. So just make sure your two images are taken by you personally. I love the contrast of your typefaces here. This is really neat. The only thing is I think I've seen this particular typeface around quite a bit. It might be nice if you could go to dafont.com and download a more fresh, just kind of different typeface. If you're able to do that, that's a script, it'll make it seem a little bit more contemporary than this one. But I really like the overall effect with your colors and with the contrasting typefaces. And you're using contrasting typefaces here too, which is excellent. It seems like your spread isn't too busy, but I might make your body copy a little bit smaller, and that'll enable you to have a little bit more white space. Okay, so see how your letters here are getting pretty close to this drop shadow in the background. I'm not sure what you have this set at, and I would guess maybe 12, but you could actually move it down to a 10 and it would still be legible for magazine copy, and then you're going to have way more white space to play around with. I would keep your columns. I would probably just move them in a little bit so they're not quite so close. You could space them out a tiny bit more, and you could bring them in a little bit from the edges of the pages. And that's going to create an overall look that's a little bit more contemporary because you're going to have more white space there. Okay. I like how you did this attribution. Your text wrap looks really good here. I like how you have this bold. So you're definitely heading in the right direction. I think you have a lot of the elements already in place that you need. I just work on adding a little bit more white space to the overall design. Maybe seeing if there's anything you can do to make this image not look so grainy, and try to find a different font for me. If you want, if this is already a creative font you downloaded, you can just let me know, but it looks like one I've used a lot in the past, and so I'm assuming it's a default, and I think it would just look more contemporary if you could switch that one out. But besides that, you're really heading in the right direction. Okay, thanks, Adam. Okay, let's move on. Oh, and thanks for the video you made. Okay, who is the next person? Amanda. Okay, let's see. Here are your two pages. Where's your, oh, there's your third. Okay. So, Amanda, you have this cute image I'm assuming you took. That looks great. Strong title. Let me go and look at this. I'm assuming you took this image too. And you have a nice text strap there. Okay, good start. Okay, a few things I'm going to point out is I would love to see this photo not have this awkward gap. I think it would look a lot more modern if you could pull it off the edge of the page and have a full bleed. Okay, so if you did that, you might need to make the image a little bit bigger by upsizing it proportionally so it goes off the side of the page, but then it will not look, in a way it looks a little bit dated, having this big gap right here. Okay, oh, and this is the one, the draw over that Alex did for you. So let me pull up this. The other thing is I think your typeface is a little bit too close to this image here. You need a little bit more space on your little teaser for what the article is about between the edge of the words and the image, okay? Another thing is you need to make sure you turn off the hyphenate in the paragraph palette because you don't ever want to have any hyphens in a contemporary magazine spread, okay? And that probably applies for your body copy that you have down here too. Make sure you turn off those hyphens. Okay, this letter, it's cool that you have it big, but you're going to want to have it big and you want it to drop down into your typefaces that's down here. And how you do that is you are just going to highlight that letter and then you will come into the paragraph palette and you're going to size it up here, okay? And see how that wraps the type around the letter and makes it look really neat. Okay, so that does, if you wanted to do a word, you could have the first word, you could play around with this one too, okay? Or just that first letter. So that'll make that look a little bit more like it's done according to the professional, you know, rule of what magazines generally do. They don't just have it large, they have it drop down in. Okay, here I see that you have an orphan line. This is the end of this paragraph, but he's stuck here all by himself. So what you need to do to remedy that is you either need to pull this column up so it ends a little bit midway into this paragraph, so you have a sentence or two or a line or two over here, or it might naturally resolve itself when you make this letter bigger, okay? So just watch for things like this. You always want to make sure you don't have one tiny word, like this tiny word right here, all by itself, or one line that is part of a paragraph that's all by itself that doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, so those are some of the things I think you can do here on this page. Also, this might be really tricky to read because this is where the page is going to fold. And so to put a quote there is going to make it really difficult for people to actually read it when it's printed. So once you pull your cute image over here, maybe you can make this quote long and tall as opposed to wide and skinny, and that'll help it be a little bit more legible and not worry about being cut off where the page is folded in the middle. All right, so let's take a look at your second page, or your third page technically. Okay, this is looking good. I would probably try to make your columns maybe, well, okay, first of all, I would do the same thing with this image. Pull it off the page so you don't have this awkward white gap. The reason why we do that is on an image, we never want to cut off the edge of it where there's not a natural cut. Okay, so you could crop this image right here or right here like you did where it makes sense because the book ends. But these books aren't just levitating, so we want the edge of the table to be right here. So it's visually implied that there's more table, it's just not on the magazine spread. We want it to be visually implied that there's more book, it's just not on the magazine spread. When we have it cropped like this, our mind says, why did we cut that book in half? That's weird. And so it's a better idea to instead, whenever you do a crop, if you're cutting something in half, you need to have it go off the edge of the page, okay? So that's kind of the rationale for the reason why I'm telling you to pull these off the edge of the page. Also, it's just going to look better and look more contemporary. So once you do that, I'm assuming this paragraph is going to fill in a little bit more here. So this is going to jump up a bit. So what you might need to do is you might need to make your two columns over here kind of live in this space down here. And maybe you make this quote bigger and move it up here a little bit more. I think you have contrasting typefaces. I can't quite tell. Make sure you do. I can tell that these are sans serifs, but visually it's too small for me to tell if this is a sans serif or a serif, or, you know, it can't be a script or anything too crazy, otherwise it wouldn't be legible. So I would just play around with making sure these columns don't have any big, awkward white space chunks. It's better to have them be the same height, okay? So if you have two of them, you want them to be about the same height, and that'll visually look nice and clean. And I think when you make this larger, you could even make this go into this column, and that would look really cool because then your text wrap would continue over two columns. So that would look really nice. All right, so I look forward to seeing where you go with it, Amanda. Your images are really good so far, and it looks like overall you're definitely moving in the right direction. All right, thanks. Okay, let's see who's next. Joshua, yep. Okay, Joshua, I'm not content with my pictures at all. Okay, awesome. New pictures. Overall, I have to say, though, your color scheme is really popping off of the page for me, which is nice. This image of the Savior doesn't really match the color scheme, though, because you have these real cool colors that are vibrant and youthful, and then this image is warm and deep and you know, red and brown as opposed to crisp white, apple green, vibrant purple. Okay, so if you could, I'd probably recommend trying to find another image of the Savior as well that has a little bit more of cool color tone to it so that it matches. All right, but I like these shapes that you've implemented. You have nice pulled out subtitles, and here's your pulled quote, and these are the two images that you've taken yourself, obviously. Okay, I will say this is pretty hard to read, so I think you're going to need to play around either on it. Your other image that you take, it's going to be need to be pretty dark so that your white is legible, or is going to be pretty light so that your black typeface is legible. I think this is purple. Is this purple? If your main body copy is purple, I'd probably recommend not doing that, just because it adds a little extra difficulty to reading it. And so I'd probably just keep it simple and put your main body copy in purple. Leave your subheadings in this, or sorry, put your main body copy in black. Leave your subheadings in this fun purple, though, because that's a nice contrast, okay? I'm going to definitely recommend you change out this typeface, though. I don't feel like it, well, okay, I'm trying to decide how strongly I'm going to say definitely. I think this is another one of the default ones that comes with InDesign. I can't remember what it's called. I just feel like I've seen it on a lot of designs, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just one of those that I feel like is overused when people say that they want something fun. That's one that they automatically go to. Is it Acme? I feel like it might be Acme. Let's see. Maybe. I can't tell. Maybe not. No, I don't think so. Okay, so I'm not going to say you definitely have to change it. I will say it looks like one I've seen a lot before, and it's just, I don't know if it embodies the message that you want to send. It looks like it's more something that would be used for really, really playful business, or I don't know. When I look at it, I think about scrapbooking, or I think about party. And so just think about the message. Now, your colors are pretty playful, so maybe that's an active choice you're making as a designer, that you're taking this article and you're making it fun, you're making it youthful. And if that's a conscious choice on your behalf, then that's why I'm saying you don't definitely need to change this, because if that's a choice, then that's a choice you can make, and I'm totally fine with it. I just want to make sure that your typeface you feel like is consistent with the message that you're sending, okay? And this looks like it's a nice serif, which is legible and awesome and great. The only other thing that I'm noticing with your typefaces right here is this purple is overlapping with the edge of your image. Now, this may have happened when you dropped it to make it a 3-page spread. And I'm guessing that's probably what happened. I'm guessing the edge of the page is actually right here. and that this just overlapped because you didn't crop it when you made it into a 3-page spread before saving it as a JPEG. If that's what happened, that's totally cool. Just make sure that on your final PDF that it's cut off right here and that you don't have this issue. And a PDF will look a little bit different anyway. Okay, so just make sure that that isn't happening here. The other thing is your pulled quote is a little bit too close to the edges. Now, if you just added a fill to this quote, it's going to do this to you. Instead, you need to insert shape, and you need to make the shape a color, just like you did with these, instead of just adding a background to the text box. All right. The other thing you need to do is, I'm not sure if Lifeblood was already hyphenated, but if not, just make sure your hyphens are turned off. Okay. And another thing I'm noticing is you have this little hanging line here. I would make this column a little bit bigger so your hanging line can stay down here with this paragraph and doesn't introduce kind of an awkward 5-word place your eye gets caught and confused. Okay, so add this line to this paragraph down at the bottom. Besides that, things are looking pretty good. I might decrease the size of these columns. So these 2 columns are a little bit more similar in width. I might consider, if you decide not to have this image of the Savior, if you just put him there as kind of a placeholder, instead I might make this other image you decide to go with even bigger. Okay, so see how powerful it looks to have a super big image over here? It's going to look equally good over here to have a nice, really big circle. Even consider making it go off the side of the page that you wrap the text around instead of kind of a small, delicate, safe circle. Remember our rule of making things contrast bigger than they need to be, big enough to surprise you, to catch your eye. That would be something that you could consider doing with this cool circle here. It's going to help give some structure to all this weird white space you have. This is called trapped white space. See how it tries to come down here, gets stuck by this shape, tries to come up here, kind of gets stuck by this one. So this is something I would either recommend pulling up your column a little bit so it fills in here, or like I said, making these images bigger so you don't have that going on. So it looks real intentional with where your white space is. And if you end up having just awkward white space at the bottom, instead make these columns smaller. Pull them in a little bit more, pull them in a little bit more, pull them down, but make sure they start at the same place still. It's really nice how you have them starting and ending at the same place. That looks really good visually. But make them just a little bit smaller so there's more white space in intentional places. Okay? So those are the main things. Oh, I do see a hyphen here. Make sure you have your hyphens turned off on your paragraph palette. Okay? So that's pretty much it for you, Joshua. You're off to a good start. I like some of the choices that you're making, and I look forward to seeing your new images and what your final design is going to look like. Okay, thanks, Josh. All right, Brooke, you opted in as well. Great. Okay, let's take a look at yours here. We love your feedback, not where I want to be yet. Okay, well, that's okay. One of the things that super jumps out to me that immediately is that you have this papyrus font here, and this is one of those fonts that people really hate. They're real opinionated about it. So I would switch this one out. And then the other thing I would do is I would make sure your hyphens are turned off in your paragraph palette. I'm going to make sure it is paragraph. It might actually be, yeah, here it is. See your paragraph? Now I have hyphens turned on. Now I have them turned off. Okay, make sure they're turned off. Joshua, if you're still listening, it's right here too. Okay, so turn those off and oh, I love how you did the justified text. That looks so crisp and clean. So great job with that, Brooke. You have your subheadings, which is really good. I like those a lot. I might consider adding maybe some color to them. Right now you have a pretty, the only real color are these shapes. Your images are pretty monotone, I guess, black and brown, and then your typeface is black. How saturated these shapes are is a little bit of a problem because I think when you print this, these are going to become illegible. And you don't have to print for this class, but you want to make sure the choices that you're making with your colors will enable you to print it if you were doing it professionally. Okay, so I would probably either make these a little bit lighter, or I think that's probably your best choice. You could also just put them in places where you don't have a conflict. Like this one, there isn't as much as a conflict. Or you could make them into rectangles. So you could have your heading be a rectangle here. I'm assuming you're going to do a text wrap around your Book of Mormon. Maybe that's why he's here and you're just still working on that. Since you do need to have a text wrap, you might be worried that once you do your text wrap, your article is going to be too long. That's totally not a problem at all. You might even consider getting rid of this whole last section and just add one small line. Read more at lds.org/richest blessings, whatever the link is, okay? So feel free to cut off the article wherever you need to in order to make it visually have plenty of white space. I think that's going to help you out so you don't have this conflict of the typeface over your background color. And probably for these shapes, I would decide whether you want them to be a real visual element on the page. If so, keep them dark and don't worry about putting your typeface over them. Or if you want them to be part of the background, lighten them up a bit and then you can have your typeface go over them. So kind of decide the purpose for these. You do have them with repetition, which you have one on each page. I might say that that might be too many. You might be able to get rid of this one and just have kind of an opening shape and a closing shape, and then do your wrap around your awesome Book of Mormon here. And that's going to make this page legible a little bit more. And I would make this image bigger so it goes off the side of the page. That's going to make it look a little bit more contemporary. And if you can play around even with the photo editor that comes as a default on your computer, I would try to increase the saturation of these pennies because they look pretty faded. And so I would open your default photo editor that comes on your computer, since we haven't gone over Photoshop yet. Increase the saturation, play around with some pictures, add the color in a little bit more. See if you can get these to look like real copper pennies instead of faded, older, dusty looking pennies. Okay, so that's going to add a little bit of visual pop to this image, and then make it come off the edge of the page so it's a full bleed and add some real good visual impact on this page. Okay, so those are some of the main things I would work on. I love the spacing of your columns. They look really nice. This one, I would probably take out this bottom line. So just pay attention. Try to make them end at the same place if you have them start at the same place too. You don't have to do that, but you don't want them to be close enough that they're just barely off. So see how this one is way down below this one? This is actually less of kind of a design faux pas than having them so close, but just slightly mismatched. Because this looks more like an accident and this looks like a choice, okay? So play around a little bit with that. I would also consider making this image a little bit more vibrant and try to edit that one a little bit if you can as well, so it stands off the page. If you want it to be in the background, I think there's probably, you're going to have to try to do something different with it because this is pretty hard to read, the black on the white. So that's why I'm assuming you're going to be trying to get a text wrap going on here, which also meets one of the requirements for the assignment. The other thing is I like how you have this at an angle, but it almost looks conflicting because you have two angles going on here. You have this nice angle of your triangle, and then you have a slightly different angle for the word. So maybe rotate this text a little bit so the richest is sitting on this line almost, and then you could make this richest even bigger, a little bit bigger, and so it looks like it's a cool white cutout from this green shape in the background, from this teal shape in the background, okay? So do something to where you don't have kind of conflicting angles here with your typefaces. And then I would maybe move blessings. See how it's just sitting right on that word? I would maybe move it so it's a little bit spread out more, okay? Kind of more like this. And let's see, so you have this typeface. Yeah, you could use this typeface for your pull quote because you already have a conflicting or contrasting. These two don't conflict, right? They go together well. So you have a contrasting typeface. You could use that for your pull quote instead of this papyrus font. And you could also use this nice script for your subtitles, but your subtitles look pretty nice as they are, so I might leave them. Okay, so that's probably a lot of food for thought for you, Brooke. Hopefully not too much, but I super look forward to seeing your finalized draft and what you decide, and to go ahead and finalize and make it look like in the end. Okay, thanks, Brooke. Bye. Okay, just two more, Stephanie and Connie. Connie, you are next. Oh, and then Stephanie. Awesome. Okay, big dive on the phonometer. Oh, I know. Week 5 is real hard, Connie. My intent, no words on the stairs. Okay. Do the inverted triangle. Oh, inverted triangle. This? I'm not totally sure what you mean by the inverted triangle. I'm guessing your words on the shape. Text over on the right column at the bottom third of the text box, so the words are on the stairs on that side either. Right. Okay. Okay. So I'm guessing these hash lines are just part of the setting you're on right now. I would try to save it next time without the guides, and so overall we can just look at it without having it have that kind of conflict for the eye. And so I'm trying to kind of break it up. I love how you did your columns. They look so neat and tidy. They look real nice. Make sure that you have, oh, here's a subtitle. Okay, you have your subtitles in there. That's good. Contrasting typefaces. I can't see if this is a sans serif. I'm going to assume it is, just so you're getting those contrasting typefaces in. The word is commitment. This title looks good. I would probably make these a little bit closer in proximity so you don't have such a gap between these. Okay, so I would pull this up a little bit. I think you made this letter a little bit bigger. I would consider making it even bigger, just going into your paragraph palette here and increasing the size of that letter like this. And that's going to wrap your body copy around it, which will help it look even more contemporary. I really like how this image is faded off the background, but you're right, you are going to have to obviously play around with it and make it work a little bit better with making sure it's visible. So I think that's probably one of your goals at this point. It seems like you do have a lot of words on the page, and maybe you're stressing about that. Feel free to cut out whatever you need from this column and just say read more at lds.org / give the link there. Okay, one small line, don't make it huge. You're not going to draw your attention to it. It's going to look like it's part of the body copy. And you can do that, and that will maybe allow you to bring some of these columns down a little bit. Maybe make this not come to the bottom of the page so much, which is fine. It just doesn't look as contemporary because there isn't as much white space, and maybe you have things that aren't as big as you want them to be. I'm wondering if you might even like to do something that's a little bit more contrasting with your typefaces for the kind of one that's supposed to pop off the page a little bit, because the sans serif, it looks, you know, official. It looks nice, but it doesn't add a real visual pop to the page. And so maybe consider if you would want to do something perhaps in a script, or a little bit more of a, maybe even a different. Now, this is actually a pretty nice, I don't think I would say a different times or a different serif, because this is a pretty nice serif. It has some real contrast between the thinnest part to the largest part. If you like the overall look, I would keep it. It's just striking me as a little bit safe in images and the amount of white space and the sizing on the pulled quote here. And so consider what you could do perhaps to have some real visual pop on the page. And maybe that means you do change your typeface here. Maybe it means you make this image a lot bigger, and you pull off a few paragraphs here at the bottom so you have more white space. Maybe you introduce a background color or a background shape to make this pulled quote pop. But your images they're nice, but they don't pop off the page either, since they're more natural. And they probably go along with the article really well, which is why I'm assuming you took them. Okay, so just try to think of something you could do in order to add some energy to the spread. And I think that'll kind of help. And also, if you want to upload a different version without the lines and the grids, it might help me see what's going on a little bit better as well. Okay, so sorry it was a rough week, but I look forward to seeing your final spread and what choices you make to kind of make it pop a little bit more. Thanks, Connie. Okay, and then Stephanie, you're our last opt-in for the course. Okay, first of all, love this page. Yes, yes, yes. Everything is right going on here. Good. Okay, I may say make the beyond slightly smaller. That's my only critique for this image, though, for this page as a whole. And then I don't love this color, to be honest. This looks pinky, and this looks beautiful and fall and kind of vibrant the way fall is. But then this becomes baby shower for me. Okay, so I would try to pull one of these colors from the leaves a little bit more, maybe one of these golden yellows as opposed to the peachy pink. And I think that'll help. I like how you have this circle here. You do need to, oh, you wrapped the text around the pulled quote, which shows me you know how to do it. But I think it would be awesome if you could maybe make the column wrap around this image instead, or in addition. Okay, so say you have this image. Now you don't want to make it bigger and cut off their heads, obviously, but you could move it down here, make it bigger, and wrap around them. Okay, so you could have a nice big circle down here. And then I would probably try to make these columns maybe a little bit, move it in a little bit more from the edge of the page. And I don't know if I love this shape, to be honest. It's leading my eye visually over here, but then there's nothing really super interesting right here that I'm looking at. And so I might consider making a shape that doesn't have a triangle. You have this circle here, so maybe you can consider making a circle shape on this page instead, or you know, something that goes off the page. I don't know, play around with different shapes, because this is kind of just catching my eye, honestly, and I'm just looking at this as opposed to the other parts that you really want me to focus on. I would change up these subheadings so they're a more interesting font, probably like this one. Or maybe do the same thing here, change this so it's a real interesting font like your Beyond or your Measure. And I would pull these subheadings so they're closer to what follows them than they are to what's above them. Because these subheadings shouldn't visually be in proximity to what's above them, because they visually need to go with this section that they're talking about. Okay, so move these down a little bit, decrease the amount of space between these two. And so this subheading goes with what follows it. You could play around with making this typeface a little bit smaller. Right now it looks pretty large. I'm guessing it's a 12. You could move it down to an 11 or a 10. That's going to allow you to have more content on the page. Be sure to move this column so it's over a little bit more. You have it kind of too close to the column on the left side of the page. All right, so move that over a little bit more. And then for your pulled quote, if you make this circle bigger and put it somewhere else on the spread that really will add a visual pop, then I would put this pulled quote away from it. You don't want your two most interesting visual things side by side. You want to spread them out a little bit. So say one thing you could do is you could take this image, you could maybe make this pink shape, or hopefully more fall golden shape, or another color. You could choose something else from the spread, maybe the green or the brown or something, but just to match this image a little bit better. So say you take this image and you could put this image on this page, and then your pulled quote could be the shining star on the other spread. Or if you want to be able to wrap this awesome column around this image, you keep the image here and maybe you put the pulled quote on this page. Okay, so just play around with these two things, since they're what you're getting the most visual pop from. You don't want them side by side. Also, there's this awkward kind of white space right here. I would recommend instead pulling this up and trying to look for some place to kind of align where it starts, and look for a nice, easy place to end it as well. Because I'm not sure, it looks like you still have more copy from the article. Okay, so I have no problem with you cutting off the article and saying read more at lbs.org/value beyond measure. As long as your overall design is looking good, go ahead and feel free to cut off the article. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a few ideas. Hey, and Connie did an awesome critique here too. I wonder what she said. Maybe she said to make your title bigger. Title circled for some reason. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. I look forward to seeing the choices you make on your final design. All right, everybody, I think that's it, unless anyone else opted in while I was making this video. Let's go check. Nope, got moved down. Opt in. 7 people still. Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. I'm really excited to see your final spreads. You all are making some great choices so far. Bye.